This Week in Startups is brought to you by Eero, the world's first home mesh Wi-Fi system. For free overnight shipping, visit eero.com/twist. At checkout, select overnight shipping, then enter promo code TWIST. And Squarespace. Start building your website today at squarespace.com. Enter offer code TWIST at checkout to get 10% off.
Hey everybody, welcome to This Week in Startups. I'm your host, Jason Calacanis, and I'm talking unnecessarily fast because there is so much news this week for us to go over. Obviously, Apple had their huge announcement for the iPhone 7 with me to discuss all things Apple and a little bit of the old Andreessen Horowitz versus Wall Street Journal. Venture capitalists fighting over returns, always fascinating. Google is taking on ISIS. Burrito drones are finally here. Airbnb, discrimination talk is still brewing. And Theranos, it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse for that. What should we call it? It's sort of like the Madoff of our industry. I think it's going to wind up being the Bernie Madoff of our industry. With me to discuss all these issues, again, Cade Metz is here. He's a senior writer for Wired, previously at The Register, the U.S. edition of The Register, the U.K. edition.
It's all one edition.
It's all one edition.
We have a bureau here in San Francisco. And
do you still write for them? Or no, that's previous.
No, that was it. But I'm with Wired now. But I had to say it was very hard to leave The Register. The Register, I think, is still, after all these years, misunderstood. It's we were just discussing this, a great training ground for reporters. Ashley Vance of Bloomberg was there with me. Dan Gooden, who's now at ours. Chris Williams, who's at The Telegraph in the UK. Jack Clark, who was at Bloomberg until recently.
And the reason it's a good training ground is because it's cynical?
Because they're so cynical. Like, the idea is, let's bring a British tabloid sensibility to tech news. Right. And if you do that, Google is not going to talk to you. And if Google won't talk to you, you're forced to go around Google, and you're forced to build your stories in other ways. And
fascinating.
It really does breed great reporters who can tell stories in ways that most in the Valley
when you were
sadly
there
do not.
And you would email Google or Facebook, they would literally just not respond.
I came in right after this guy named Andrew Orlovsky, who had been covering Google since its earliest days, and they hated him like you would not believe, and probably for good reason. Right. I could tell you stories, but because I was following the footsteps of Andrew, they would not say word one to me. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me as a tech reporter, I have to say.
Because you weren't getting spun.
You're not getting spun, and it teaches you. It makes you work harder. It makes you work harder, and it makes it easier to see those angles that this company isn't feeding you like they feed to everybody else.
See, it's an interesting point you make, Cade, because I have a tip line for the launch ticker. Mm-hmm. Do you know where the tip line goes?
Where?
To me and only me. Uh-huh. Literally, the 7 people who write the ticker do not get the tips. And they're like, well, why don't we get the tips? I'm like, anybody sending a tip has automatically disqualified themselves from being newsworthy. That's my feeling on it, right? There's nothing coming into the tip line but press release. And if something happens to come in that's extraordinary and it's like an actual real tip, then I will be the one who decides as God King editor if I'm going to forward it back on to you people. But I don't want you finding your stories there. Go out and hunt for stories. I think it's a really good point. And previously you were at PC Magazine.
Yes. Which
you were there in the 90s? Or the aughts?
Late 90s and early aughts, which is, the magazine is now defunct.
So sad.
Sadly, the world has changed.
I knew what day it was coming every month, and I would come home from high school, like literally on my 10-speed, with the S-curved brakes, like 2 sets of brakes. I'd be on my 10-speed in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, racing home up 75th Street, which is a really steep hill. To get home, to get PC Magazine and open, I would go through every page.
There were a lot of people like you, and when I got there, it was a license to print money. I mean,
it was 300 pages?
It was
400
incredible moneymaker, and then shortly after I arrived, all that changed. And sadly, they did not pick up on this thing called the internet very quickly.
Hilarious.
It really changed the entire.
How would a magazine about PCs ever be able to figure out that online services would be big? How could they ever see that coming? It's really interesting. Also with us today, for the first time, Ellen Huet, who is a reporter, simply put, a reporter at Bloomberg.
To be fancy,
I love it. I just love the fact that there's still people doing reporting. Bloomberg has been doing such a great job of breaking stories. Like, great job.
We have a great team. I work with amazing people.
What's nice about it, I think, is you guys are not pressured to link bait or get page views. There's nobody going to a Bloomberg reporter saying, like at a Business Insider or a Huffington Post or BuzzFeed or Gawker, or TechCrunch, where like, how many page views do you get? Has anybody ever asked you how many page views did you get or how many likes on your stories?
No, I mean, we have an equivalent on the terminal, which is terminal hits. But even then, I mean, you're right. We are luckily, very luckily, like sheltered a lot from that.
Yeah. And the reason is because Mike prints money with those damn terminals. Those things cost what, $500 a month, $1,000 a month?
I believe it's closer to $22,000 a year. I'm not sure.
So $2,000 a month to have a Bloomberg terminal, which is nothing if you're in the money business.
Right.
And that's what underwrites this fantastic journalism that occurs at Bloomberg.
Well, thank you.
I am super impressed because the Hampton Creek story.
Olivia's amazing.
Olivia was on the show,
so good.
and she broke that.
I watched that episode, yeah.
She was so good. And they're just hiring reporters over there to do real journalism. And you have a new space over here on the in Barcadero.
Yeah, I don't know how new it is, but it's beautiful. Come by and check it out sometime.
Yeah, it's a couple
Great
years
views of the water and the TV studio.
And the TV studios and all the free food.
Yes, that's at every office.
We're
big on the pantry
Mike
culture.
Bloomberg started the free food thing. When I used to do Bloomberg in the 90s, I would come up at 6 a.m. It was the biggest thing in the world for me because I was a kid from Brooklyn. I was a journalist, a reporter, doing Silicon Valley Reporter. And they would pick me up in a carry car service, which was mind-blowing to me. I would talk to my mom. They sent a Lincoln Town Car. I came downstairs 10 minutes late. The guy was still there. Then they would drive me there in Lincoln Town Car. The driver would wait. I would go up for 15 minutes. I would go on air for 5 minutes, talk about the internet. I would get off air. Mike Bloomberg would be standing there watching me talk about the internet. And I'd sit down and I'd eat oatmeal with Mike Bloomberg at 6:10 a.m. And I had all the free food. And I said, Mike, why do you have all this free food here? It's like costing you a fortune. It's like, you know how much that cost me per person? He's like, it cost me like $2,000 a year. Nothing. And nobody leaves the office. They can just keep working. And they don't have to worry about going downstairs and getting food. They just grab it and keep working. It's the greatest money ever spent. I was like, wow, that's brilliant. And then Google obviously cribbed
Really
that.
ahead of his time, yeah.
He was super ahead of his time. I had a lot of interesting conversations with Mike Bloomberg in the 90s.
That's cool.
Cool dude. Does he ever come by the office or no? Have you ever seen him?
I have seen him in New York, not in San Francisco.
Not in San Francisco.
But to be fair, I have only worked at Bloomberg since December, so
Got it.
maybe if I
all right.
I will.
Let's get right into it. Apple had an event on, I guess it was Tuesday. Was it Tuesday? The 7th? Yeah. Today is the 9th.
I have a question about this. If there's so much news to get to, why are we wasting all this time with the Apple stuff?
It's a fair point.
I'm serious. I am dead serious.
I mean,
Cade, are you saying that because you think it was an underwhelming event, or because you're just tired of covering Apple?
I think that
you don't cover Apple.
I don't cover Apple, thank goodness. But I mean, I don't know. The importance placed on these Apple events is ridiculous to me. I mean, I think that people are trying to relive their youth. Like it was so much fun.
When Steve
I can vouch for this. When Steve came out to announce the iPhone, that was quite a day.
Electric.
Incredible in so many ways.
And the iPad.
Yeah, sure, although not quite as incredible, but
and the MacBook Air.
Okay. See, now we're starting to go down the line, and there comes
why we're still talking
right,
about it.
and there comes a point where like we're just trying to recreate this stuff that we really enjoyed in the past. The iPhone, it's great. It's going to continue to do great things, but this idea that it can just keep improving ad infinitum and do all these incredible things is just not a reality. And the watch is an attempt to go on to the next thing beyond the iPad. I am not convinced that is something that people are really going to want and need, at least not in its current incarnation.
Okay, so there's a lot
there.
What
about the fancy watch strap? That doesn't.
Wow, it's a great watch strap, I have to say. And I don't know, like all the trappings of it it's still fun. Like James Corden gets in a car with Tim Cook. It's a good time on some level. But as far as it being important to our world, it's not that important.
It was important to me because it meant that lower iPhone prices were going to drop a little more, and I've been in the market for an iPhone for probably
Oh, you've been an Android user for this time?
No. I don't even know if I want to show
turn
it to you.
Turn your microphone in there so you can talk right into it.
My iPhone is really battered.
What is that? That's an iPhone 5 or 6?
It's an iPhone 5 that's been broken a bazillion times. And
you work at Bloomberg.
I know.
And you work in tech.
I know. I've been waiting to get the new one. So that's why I was excited about the Apple event. I just looked for the price drop.
You're exactly why Apple could be screwed right now.
I am, yeah.
Because I get the sense that there is no compelling reason for people to upgrade their phones right now, and the statistics are proving this out.
Yeah.
The number of people who upgraded to the iPhone 6 is like 10% or something. There's like 80% of people have something before or maybe it's 85 or 90% have something before the iPhone 6. Everybody seems to be waiting.
Yeah.
Right. Well, this is a corollary to what I was saying earlier. Right?
Yeah.
There isn't that incentive. The one that's coming out now isn't that much greater than the one you have in your pocket. So you don't need to upgrade. Apple wants you to upgrade. There's so much money in that, right?
Yep.
Their market is saturated here in the U.S. Everybody has an iPhone. Although it may not be the newest.
To be
right?
fair, I had bought an iPhone 6, so I'm part of that 10%. And then a few months after I bought it, I was robbed. So I went back to using my old one. That's why.
Okay. All right.
You got robbed?
Yeah.
Like at gunpoint, or
no,
they just stole it from your purse?
It was stolen from my hand, which is like technically a robbery, but a pretty mild
Literally,
one.
they ripped it out of your hand and ran? Where?
Yeah. Near Alamo Square.
So in the lovely city of San Francisco, you literally had your phone ripped from your hands.
I did.
This is mayorjason.com. I'm going to leave it at that. When I'm mayor, I swear to God, I'm tripling the number of cops. I'm going to Giuliani Bloomberg this
So
place.
I had written, what was funny was I had written a couple months before I'd been
unbelievable.
robbed, I'd written about how activation lock and new updates also to Android OS was supposed to, over time, deter theft because it was going to reduce the value of a stolen phone that didn't have a special password. It didn't matter. I was still robbed, right? So
Did you go on Find My iPhone and then watch the person
it was
run away?
turned off. I know for a fact that phone was not useful to anyone, but it's not like I was going to get it back.
So they turned it off. Nobody can use it. I guess they could wipe it and use it over Wi-Fi, but wouldn't it send home a beacon or something?
Yeah,
like that?
you can't. It's.
can't.
I mean, there are more limits now than there were before, but it just takes a couple of years, I think, for the effects. The deterrent effect is not an immediate one.
So you're saying that the people on methamphetamine in the Tenderloin.
Well, no, they steal motorcycle spark plugs.
Yeah.
They don't steal phones.
Yeah, but they don't. The people on methamphetamine have not figured out that stealing phones is not a great idea anymore.
Maybe by now. This was
Maybe
almost
they
a year
have.
ago, so I've used this broken phone
when
for
we
a very
look at
long
the
time.
iPhone 7, I'm very sorry about your phone being stolen.
No,
by the
it's
way.
okay. It was over before I knew it was happening.
I'm basically biting my tongue right now because people know that this lawless town has got me on tilt. Like the fact that this town has such massive crime and has so much prosperity and they can't solve basic problems here.
Would you ever run for mayor?
Now you're just trolling me. Now you're just
I'm
trolling
honestly
me.
curious. Kara Swisher has talked about it. I feel like we are going to have a
literally,
tech mayor in the next 15 years.
I have.
It might be Benioff.
Here's what's happening. I have mayorjason.com registered.
Wow.
Registered about 6 months ago because I had 4 different people come up to me and ask me to run. They each put up $250,000. They're 4 of the most famous people in the industry. And one of the top 3 or 4 most famous people in the industry said they would come on the campaign trail with me and introduce me and get me elected. And this person is so high profile and so well respected that he could probably get half the votes in San Francisco because he's kind of like one of these godlike creatures in the tech business.
And you're not going to tell us who it is.
I can't say who it is. But anyway, there is a secret cabal of people who have been pushing me, and they put up $1 million for the fund. I have no interest in being in public office, but there's 3 problems I could solve. I could solve 2 out of 3 problems that they'll go for. Number 1, homeless. Number 2, crime. And number 3, traffic. There's a 4th one, which is housing, which is very hard. So those would be my 4 agenda items. Solve homeless, solve crime, solve traffic, solve housing.
Can you stop the Apple press events? Is that do it?
That's not possible. When we get back, I want to find out what my guests think are the most important features of the iPhone 7 or the watch or anything, if there was anything about this
cruel.
conference that matters when we get back after this important message. And I am so excited to have Eero. I was pressing Arrow the other day, but it's Eero, like an ear. Eero, which is the world's first home mesh Wi-Fi system. If you don't have it, it is unbelievable. Mesh basically means the routers, and you buy them in like 3 packs, work together to blanket your apartment or house with Wi-Fi. I use it, and I have to tell you, Mesh is just a game changer with a simple iOS or Android app. Eero just blankets your home. It's perfect. It works. I love the product. It's one of those game-changing products that once you use it, you're like, oh my God, I'm not having this debate with the members of my family as to like, why isn't the Wi-Fi working here? Why is the Wi-Fi? Why is Netflix slow? Why is this? Everything just starts to work amazingly. It's so reliable. And they've got a special offer for This Week in Startups listeners. You just go to eero.com. And at checkout, you should select overnight shipping and enter the promo code TWIST, and it will be free. Not the Eero units, the shipping. Overnight shipping for free for This Week in Startups listeners. I guarantee you're going to love this product. eero.com, eero.com. Eero is the it's probably the best thing for you to buy this Christmas for somebody or for your home. Literally all this nonsense with your family's Wi-Fi not working in all these different places in your house and people fighting over who's on Netflix, turn this off, reboot the router. It just goes away. Everything just works. It's the router that should have been built. And it's the Wi-Fi system that should have been built a decade ago. But finally, here we are, year 15 of Wi-Fi. Eero has fixed it, and it works. Okay, so just to put a little cap in all of this, Ellen, was there anything that you found appealing and desirable at the iPhone 7 launch at the Apple press conference? Was there anything that you said, like, I got to have it? Was there anything that made you drool?
You're talking to someone who's planning to buy an iPhone SE probably later today. So I was looking at the price drop. I will say they talk about it being water resistant. That's great. I would really prefer if they would make the screen a little stronger. That being not my area of expertise. I don't know how feasible that is for what price, but you know, I'm also not incensed by getting rid of the headphone. I don't know. It seems like.
Let's talk about that for a second. So they have gotten rid of the headphone jack, which is the most sturdy and reliable connector probably in our industry. Like, has anybody ever plugged in a phone jack and had it not work? It just works. Has anybody ever used a Bluetooth device and had it work on the first try or not take 25 seconds?
No, it's a good point. I mean, but you know, I have to say that one thing that Apple does do right is it gets things to work, right? They pretty much work out of the box, and that's one of their big strengths. I mean, I think
that is true.
The danger here is eventually what they want to do is bridge the gap between analog and digital, okay? And in the long term, that makes sense. But what bothers me about the way they operate is that there's always this danger that when you plug something in, whether it's a connector that goes into their new jack or whatever it is, that it's not going to work because it's not officially blessed by Apple. And this happens to be all the time, right?
That message.
I was when I at the register, I was a Google reporter, right? And that's when the Android arrived, and so I was an Android guy.
Yeah,
and I still am, just for historical purposes. And everyone else in my house has an iPhone.
Yeah,
and half the time, you can't plug one, just into a wall connector used by the other because Apple won't allow it because it hasn't been blessed by the organization, and that's what bothers me. I mean, Apple likes to control things, and there are good reasons, but there are times when it goes too far. And what you don't want is a situation where you've got this it's that term that always comes up, the walled garden over here, and it doesn't work with whatever else you have, right?
There's also something weird going on, Ellen. I noticed that when I bought my MacBook, the new MacBook, not the Pro, but the MacBook that's kind of like the new sexy one, it has a USB-C connector, which is the new standard. So my new Nexus 6 phone, which I have here, I think it's a Nexus 6, which is using the Google Fi network, Project Fi, which is amazing. It's so cheap. Nice. That's, to me, my favorite product of like
that is something worth talking about. That is a big change.
Why is that? Do you have it? Do you have Google Fi? You have Google Fi?
He probably knows more.
Project Fi?
Yes, it is. It is.
Explain to people why Google Fi is so appealing, because I am in love with it, and you apparently are too.
It's funny that this follows on from what I was saying about Apple. I mean, it's sort of the inverse of the way Apple operates, right? The way it works today is, and historically has worked, is I am sort of beholden to my wireless carrier.
Verizon.
AT&T, Verizon, everything I do has to go through them, right? If I want to roam on someone else's network, it has to be through Verizon. It has to be through their roaming relationships. What we all really want is wherever we are in the world, we can log on to the wireless network that has the best signal at that given moment, right? That's what we all want. Well, Verizon doesn't want that because that means less money for it, right? It can't control the relationship. It can't control the dollars, right? Project Fi is an effort to break all that up. And in essence, the way it works today is it partners with two big carriers today. It's T-Mobile and Sprint. Okay, they've added a few others, one in Europe. But basically, the way it works is if Sprint has the best signal where I am right now, I go into Sprint. If the best signal is T-Mobile, I go into T-Mobile. If the best signal is Wi-Fi, I go onto Wi-Fi.
Right, and they're building out their Wi-Fi network.
Right, and they do this neat thing where there is a like a network of Wi-Fi hubs that are whitelisted. They know they're safe. They automatically log you on. You can make calls there, and then if you switch to cellular, it automatically switches the call.
So great.
That's just the way things should work.
And it's working. Yeah.
This is what we should be talking about. Not
and it's
Apple's
$20 a month
jack.
for the basic service. $10 per gig, I think, is the cost.
Right now.
When I go overseas, you know what I do? I just think in my mind mentally, plane ticket, couple $1,000.
Right.
Hotel, couple $1,000. Right. And my third biggest expense, no longer food. It's my data bill. It's going to be $500 in data. Yeah. I just assume that I'm going to get screwed. Even if I do that thing where you call in advance and you get it set up, I hate Verizon.
That's because of that model. Now, what is traditional? What has happened over the past few years is that as Google and others do stuff like this, it forces these big players to change. Okay, and that's hopefully what's going to happen here. You get Sprint on board, you get T-Mobile on board. Hopefully, you can force the hand of Verizon and AT&T, and we've seen this time and again. The model is better than it was just a few years ago, and hopefully, it'll continue to change.
The thing that I find particularly underwhelming about this event is making the phone water and dust resistant is something that Samsung, I believe, did either 2 or 3 years ago. That literally, and they trumpeted it as if they had it discovered this and launched it themselves. It was a little bit bizarre. Did you notice that, Ellen?
Yeah, I mean, I think they have an idea that they operate in a different echelon, and that when they
do it, it's new.
Yeah, exactly.
Because of the way they
the
actually
tablet wasn't new, but they.
Yeah, and then also the 2 cameras for different focal length. They thought, nice, but I don't. The iPhone 6 takes 6S at least takes such amazing photos. I don't really care. And then the watch. Their watch, literally, I use the Fitbit right now, which is the GPS version, the Surge, which has GPS in it. This watch I've had for so long that the rubber is falling apart on it. Yeah, I've had it for years. It's delightful, and they just caught up to it. They're like, oh yeah, it's water resistant now, and we have GPS, so you don't need to bring your phone with you, and we'll make a map. It's like, really, guys? There was nothing, literally nothing at this. They didn't need to have this keynote. I am 100% in agreement with you.
You agree with me.
I am now. We're 15 minutes
You can't run for mayor now. You've just insulted Apple on air. No one is going to vote for you.
I think I just have to. I think what's happening is, and I'm interested in your thoughts on this as well, but I think what may have happened is because you put Tim Cook in charge, you've put somebody who is an efficiency expert in charge, not a visionary product person in charge. So what we're seeing is the massive efficiency of the Apple ecosystem vis-a-vis we're going to make more money off of the battery pack. They launched a battery pack for the iPhone. That was always a third-party thing. Then they're launching the new headsets. That was a third-party thing, and they bought the Beats headsets. It feels like they're just trying to optimize the hell out of the accessory business.
Well, I mean,
and nothing with the actual core products is breaking out.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right, but I don't know. I think people are too hard on poor Tim Cook. Right? He's not Steve Jobs clearly. He's a supply chain guy, and he was their supply chain genius, and he's not going to be Steve Jobs. But this is also a certain point in Apple's history where Steve Jobs would have struggled. Right? That I think where the change is really going to come. Is with artificial intelligence, and Apple is behind there, right? That's where that's one big area. There are a couple of other big areas where they just don't play, and they need to learn to play there. And the hardware, the iPhone arrived because and the iPod because we at that moment we had the ability to do something that small, put that
miniaturization of chips,
right? There was this moment, for the whole industry where there was a window where Apple could do that, and. They're trying to push things like the watch where it's just not, it's not going to happen yet.
The watch is so underwhelming. Ellen, is this a fundamental problem for Apple? Are they falling so far behind now and releasing new products that we might be sitting here and they may really start to degrade as a company? Because it doesn't seem like there's a new category killer, and the iPhone revenue is now going down.
I mean, I think people look at the iPhone revenue and see it as worrying with good reason, and I have to agree with Cade here, which is that I think Apple's progress in AI is a thing that if they don't manage to keep up, 10 years from now we're going to see a huge, they'll be behind in ways that we can't even really conceptualize now.
Yeah.
In products that we didn't even imagine would be something that we'd use every day, and if they, I have no insight into Apple's AI workings right now, but the impression I get from the outside, and Cade probably knows more, is that they're not the leader. And I think if you believe that it's going to transform a lot of the things that technology does and can do and what people pay for and use, then that's a huge problem.
I have a number of warning signals. I want you to tell me which one of these is the most troubling to you about Apple. These are my warning signals. Number one, Steve Jobs said on his deathbed to Walt Mossberg, famously, it was talked about in the book, and Walt Mossberg has since talked about it, that he had solved television and that he was going to release an actual physical TV. I revealed this in 2007 when I happened to be on a press tour in the UK, and somebody had told me in and around Apple that they were working on a television, an actual physical television. In other words, not just the hockey puck Apple TV, but a television. They have not been able to release that television, nor have they been able to negotiate the OTT, over the top, direct OT, I guess they call it, over the top.
Yep.
Over the top OTT. Basically, you can buy HBO, through the App Store, kind of a service, or you can build a bundle yourself in the App Store. That was what Steve wanted to do. That required two things. One, a visionary hardware person to push forward a physical new category device, like they did with the watch, tablet, and phone. So that piece didn't happen. But also, more troublingly, they weren't able to negotiate with the media companies. And that was something Steve Jobs magically did with iTunes, right? He got all the music companies to put their stuff on there. It was legendary, the negotiations, and he personally did them. And he also did it with magazines, famously negotiating with Rupert Murdoch to get things like the Wall Street Journal onto the tablet. And the book business, he also was involved in getting all the book people to participate. Then we have this Project Titan. They're going to build a car. And they fail at negotiating with BMW or Mercedes. I think Steve Jobs would have got that negotiation done, and they failed to build an actual car, and now supposedly they're building an operating system. It's two failures back to back. Then you have the phone, which has now fallen hopelessly behind Samsung, where they're literally releasing things 2 years after Samsung. 2 full years after Samsung, and that's the best they can do.
Well, they're not catching on fire as often. That's one thing.
That's a pretty good point, too. That in their defense, they're not spontaneously exploding. You want to... And I just want to let people know, you may not want to keep your Samsung in the front pocket. This could be particularly disastrous. Put it in the jacket pocket or something, but be careful. Then you have the watch, which has also been tremendously underwhelming and is not as good as Fitbits. They're literally catching up to Fitbit circa, 3 years ago. These are 4 very specific projects that they could have had operational or negotiating ecosystem excellence.
You're right.
Which one of these 4 is the most disturbing? Am I being too hard on giving them an F or a D on all 4 of these? I give them a D.
I think you're being a little bit too hard because, I don't know, the most interesting thing you talked about is the TV thing.
Okay.
And the car thing too. But let's start with the TV thing. Yeah. The TV thing ties into something that happened this week at the FCC.
Okay.
What you have in the middle now, I think that, let me make the point that the world is changing and these big players outside of Apple have seen what happened in the past with these other things, and they realize that they can get ahead of it themselves, right? And that's what they're trying to do. But with the TV thing, you have these giant cable companies in the middle of this. And that's the problem, right? Things are slowly changing, but it's not just about negotiating with media companies. It's about these cable giants.
Yeah.
And we had this important, at least proposal from the FCC this week, which is trying to change the cable setup. The way it works nowadays is we have to have that cable box in our living room. It's got to translate the signal and go to our television, and we are beholden to those cable providers, just like we're beholden to Verizon and AT&T on our phones, right? That's what's making that so difficult. That's why you can't, just stream these stations straight into your Apple TV, and it should work that way. Okay,
it should just work.
It's like the Project Fi thing. That's the way everybody on Earth wants that, right?
Yep.
We don't want to pay however many dollars we pay every month to rent these cable boxes.
Yeah,
we want an app. We can put on any box we want, any device we want, watch whatever we want, and that's the way it should be. And you have people like Comcast who are pushing against it.
Okay, Ellen, we talked about TV, Project Titan, the car, the phone, the watch, and we also talked about AI a bit. I'll add to that a 6th place where I think Apple is absolutely failing and shouldn't be, which is Oculus, HTC, and Sony PlayStation all have exceptional VR offerings, and Samsung has a very good one. 4 competitors, all with exceptional VR products, Apple with none. So there's 6 areas that I want you to choose from. Which one is the biggest embarrassment, do you think, or where Apple should be doing much better? Is it the TV, the car, the phone, the watch, VR, AI? Where are they weakest and they should be doing better? Which is most troubling?
I'm going to vote car.
You're going to vote car.
Yeah.
Explain, unpack it.
I just feel like it's, again, one of these places where they could, I think it's more of a disappointment, right? Like you could see Apple being a company that really wins in cars and is something that's going to completely change what we do in the next 30 years. And the idea that they seem to be the ones behind even, non-public companies like Uber is almost surprising. Like that they have so many resources. And again, Apple is this sort of inscrutable company from the outside. I've never spent time as an Apple reporter, but simply as an observer, I spent, sometimes covering Google, a lot of time covering Uber. I see them going after the car possibility, and that's a really broad possibility, but I see them going after it so aggressively.
What should they do? What should Apple do in cars? What would be something bold and audacious for them to do? They have $200 billion plus sitting there. The largest hedge fund in the world is now Apple, for all intents and purposes. I don't know if they run it like a hedge fund, but it is. What should they do? Is there something? What would Steve Jobs do if he was here? Do you think, Ellen?
I don't know, the OS maybe, but I feel like, again, the car, it's more like I see a potential for a great disappointment. Not that they have maybe already failed. So maybe it's like a mid-year checkup. Yeah. Because it seems really early to know kind of what other companies might do, and that would make it clearer, I think, where Apple has failed if that's kind of the end conclusion.
I think you're right. This is the type of thing that they would seem to be suited to, right? What you want is your phone to seamlessly integrate with your car, right? Sure. Everything you're doing as you walk towards your car, you want it to just happen when you have to drop the phone, right? Yeah. That's what you want. And Apple would seem to be in a good position to do that. I think you make a great point about VR as well, though. And it's the same sort of thing, right? That is a hardware area where they could potentially excel.
Graphics.
Yes.
Having their own chipsets.
Exactly.
They have their own chipsets. They have the A chipset series, and then they have the graphics chipset series. They have the mobile chipset series. They have all these chipsets. Well, shouldn't they be crushing it? It doesn't make any sense to me.
And you're right. And Google's ahead of them. Facebook is way ahead of them. They took a different route. They acquired a company. Microsoft is ahead of them.
Well, HoloLens, they're ahead of them. I forgot that. There's 5 companies ahead of them on VR. HoloLens is ahead of them. I mean, it's such... I think the word is embarrassment now. And this is what happens, I think.
Wow, you're definitely not going to be elected mayor.
Whatever. Listen, I think they need a kick in the... I think sometimes you need a kick in the pants. All right, when we get back, we're going to talk about Theranos and Google on this amazing episode. Rest in peace, Apple. Oh boy, this is some Apple fanboys and gals who are going to be getting back to me on that. No, literally, I mean, it's a problem, I say, with all of my Apple devices on the table here. Hey, let me tell you about a flawless product that I use every day. It's called Squarespace, and we build all our websites on it because it simply works, and I don't need to hire tons of developers or designers to have a great-looking website up and running in minutes. And if you go to launchscale.net, or you go to launch.co, or you go to any of our websites, Launch Festival, we always use Squarespace because it's intuitive and easy to use, and all of the people on my team can log in just like they're using Google Docs or Microsoft Word or just a calendar app, and they can just edit the website. It makes things so easy to use, and you get a free domain if you sign up for a year. It's trusted by millions and some of the most respected brands in the world. So get started, free trial today at squarespace.com, and when you decide to sign up for Squarespace, make sure you use the offer code TWIST and get 10% off your first purchase. Yes, go to squarespace.com, sign up for free. Hey, you get a free domain name if you do it free here. And when you decide to sign up, because at least sign up for free for a trial because they're so confident, you can use the promo code TWIST. Thank you to Squarespace. I mean, they've been a supporter of this program and independent media like this program for years. Really great company. And if you're a developer or a designer or a business development person or a business person, let me tell you, that's probably the best company you could work for in New York. Anthony over there does a great job, and it's a great team. Everybody go ahead and thank at Squarespace on their Twitter and Facebook handles, and go ahead and give it a shot. If you've got a small business, or your mom or your uncle or your cousin needs to get a website up and running, or you have a special project or a portfolio, or you want to do commerce or calendars, all that stuff is in there, and it looks like $1 million, and you only pay tens of dollars. Okay, thanks again to Squarespace. All right, let's keep the show moving. This Andreessen Horowitz story is very interesting to me. Rolf Winkler, who was just on the program this week in startups, and has been doing some pretty good journalism. He did a big story about the Sequoia Scouts program, which I was featured in. That was a particularly good journalism. But he really, the only reason I know it's really good journalism, not because I was in the story, but because I was part of the formation of that project at Sequoia. And I know the number of people he talked to, because every time when you're a subject and somebody asks, your friends immediately call you and say, hey, by the way, this guy's doing a story. He too must have talked to dozens of people. He somehow got the results of Andreessen Horowitz's funds, the early results. And The basic gist of it was that although Andreessen Horowitz is considered among the top tier firms, their results are way, 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 way behind Sequoia Benchmark and Founders Fund, even though Andreessen Horowitz is way ahead of those firms probably in terms of reputation because you have Mark Andreessen tweeting all day long, Ben Horowitz out there rapping with Nas. Who else on their team is just Chris Dixon? I mean, they're just like this media empire, podcasts, statistics, everything. So they've puffed up, little pufferfish going on there, like, hey, we're this big. But they've basically doubled their money. Whereas someone like Benchmark, 11x, or, Sequoia, 10, 20, whatever, 8x, because of things like WhatsApp, Benchmark, things like Uber, Founders Fund, obviously had a bunch of wins too. They've responded in, I think, kind of Andreessen Horowitz had somebody on the team respond that wasn't.
It was Scott Cooper.
Scott Cooper, the CFO or something?
I'm not sure what his title is, but he writes a lot of the stuff on the...
Yeah, but they didn't have Mark Andreessen respond or whatever. And they basically said, like, hey, Rolf doesn't know what he's talking about. It was a little... I felt they were dissing Rolf a little bit. What was your take on the story, Ellen? Is it an important story? Is this just and who planted this story? Was this planted by the firms that did better than them?
I have no idea.
What's the backstory?
It's always fun to think about where the idea came from. I mean, I imagine Andreessen Horowitz brings in a lot of attention onto itself for all the reasons that you mentioned.
Sure.
Very good reasons.
50 tweets a day from Mark Andreessen.
Yeah.
Literally tweets 50 times a day on average.
As I've always thought about, and I think actually Fred Wilson maybe had a post on this recently. It was like venture capitalists are the preeminent content marketers of our time in that, yes, that they put out all this stuff that is both useful as well as advertising for their firm.
Right.
Slightly they're masterful at this. And I love to read it because honestly...
Andreessen in particular, right?
Yeah.
Andreessen in particular, but I always like to say Paul Graham was kind of the first one. Like I know people who before YC was a thing, they were like, well, I didn't really know. I wanted to come out and start a startup. And I had read this guy's essays and I thought, I'll apply to his accelerator. Sure, this was before it even had a great reputation. So it's fun to see that. And so, I think, who knows where the idea for the story came from? I think every reporter who covers venture thinks about, is there something behind the, I don't know how many people they have at the firm, but like 100 people who work at Andreessen.
That was a big
marketing
thing they did. Instead of taking their massive fees and spreading them amongst the partners, somebody who was being recruited as a partner told me they only recruit partners who are already millionaires or have tens of millions of dollars. This isn't public knowledge, but the reason they do that is they don't want people who need $500,000, $1 million a year to live in Atherton or Palo Alto or Los Altos and pay for private school and the expensive cost of living here. They want people who don't need that money so they can put it towards marketing, PR, human resources, people. And
they have amazing people in operations and PR. I mean, Margaret is very, very good at, and they're all very good at their jobs. And so they run, I think, my point is, I think they bring a lot of attention on themselves, so anyone is right to ask these questions. And Rolf had an amazing get, which is numbers on
somebody gave him the actual returns.
It's an incredible,
who leaked those returns?
Great numbers. I don't know. I have no idea. If I knew, I would be asking them why they didn't give them to me. So,
here's a little inside piece of information. I'm an LP in a number of funds. Got a note from one of the funds. We'd like to talk about confidentiality in light of some recent stories that are out there. All of our funds are confidential. We need and in order to be invited back to funds, like basically the message was pretty clear. Like if we find out you leaked, you're not going to be in the next fund.
Was that before or after Rolf's
after the story came out?
Sure, not surprising.
Yeah, well, maybe we can talk after the show.
Yeah.
But
you think I'm going to get myself bounced from these funds?
Won't know it's
not happening.
But I mean, so I think he got really good numbers. I think where the Journal may have some regrets is really that they used the word returns in the headline, and I don't know what the print version was. But by the way, this all happened when I was like completely off the grid and
in Burning Man.
I was at Burning Man. Yes.
Me too.
Which when did you go?
Oh, or what Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
That's fun. Very exciting.
We'll have to talk after.
We'll talk later. I know. Well, I was there all week.
Can't ask that question. Can't ask this question. Can't ask that question.
Right.
We're adjourned.
We'll chit chat after. But I was there all week, so I missed. I don't remember what day of the week it came out. But the point is,
the returns word is troubling because
it just means I think
they haven't actually returned.
Exactly. I think they made a good point about marks being something that it's measuring something that isn't closed, and so I understood that rebuttal. I think where I'll say that I thought Andreessen's response was a little like weaselly was that they, and I got this idea from my coworker, Eric Newcomer, who also covers startups. And he made this point in his newsletter, which is that, they go through all the numbers and stuff about the funds. And at the end, they say, hey, if you really want to judge how well we've been doing, you should just look at who is continuing to give us money. We raised 1-point-something billion in our most recent fund.
Right.
Ergo, you should trust. Like, we're doing great.
If the smart people who have large amounts of money to invest are still giving us more money, we're just fine.
Which I think is kind of unfair because
that's actually not what we're talking about here. We're talking about how good you are versus the other firms, and your number. If you're number 15 in terms of return.
Exactly. The whole point of the Wall Street Journal story is that the image might belie right the reality, and what they're saying is, oh, hey, the image is great. People keep giving us money, right?
Right. It's like, what are these? I mean, these people are smart and have access to more information than average people and reporters, but nevertheless, they also don't have full information, and they are choosing to give money. Ergo, like, there's something else that's pushing them to give money.
By the way, they continue to give money to Theranos, and they continue to give money to Bernie Madoff after, and people continue to buy Enron stock. I'm not saying that Andreessen Horowitz is fraud, but the point is, if you're going to take the defense that people are giving us money, therefore nothing to worry about, I can make you a long list of people who were given money who were committing fraud, let alone just underperforming.
Exactly
this is a case of underperforming. So that is I agree with you. It's a smarmy, like, shut up reporter. Yeah.
Well, the rest of the
it's a pat you on the head, isn't it? A pat you on the head.
It is, right? They use this ostensibly very nice language at the top, right? But it is insulting, and I think that this is a nice segue to Theranos. We'll have to get there.
Yeah, we'll get there.
But what's interesting is just, and I have to admit, I think like a journalist because I am. Yeah. But is the way that response played out, and this is the way it so often happens. We talked about this the last time I was on the show. Amazon, this is the way they work, right? Andreessen Horowitz didn't want to participate in the Wall Street Journal story. There was a no comment, right? And then they unload their own spin, right? And it makes it seem like the Wall Street Journal story was like completely deficient and not worth doing.
I don't know, but I imagine Andreessen and Rolf had spent a lot of time talking about this on background before anything ran.
You got it.
This is how you make sure you do your best to make sure something's accurate.
Yes.
And then you end up with a no comment line. And then afterward, they put out a blog post that is everything that they wanted you to convey in the story without their official comment.
Right. And of course, it's about returns. Ultimately, we want to see what's returned, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't write any story until all the money's in, right? I mean,
I think what's interesting about it, because obviously I'm in the business, I have a lot of inside information about it.
Do tell.
Yeah, exactly. So here's the thing. Years ago, when Andreessen Horowitz came into the game, people were obviously threatened because they said, we're going to do something that affects your pocketbook. Anytime you F with people's money, you can expect a different type of reaction between people. Like, it's one thing to say, like, hey, yeah, I'm going to come in and I'm going to, be a player in this space. It's another thing to be like, yeah, we're going to take all the fees and we're going to tell all the LPs out there that we're taking the fees and putting them into the startup, so we're better than Sequoia, Founders, and Benchmark. Like, that's a shot across the bow kind of moment. We're taking our fees, we're building teams. And then they go to the entrepreneurs and say, hey, entrepreneurs, we're going to provide you with services that they don't provide you with. Bill Gurley doesn't have a human resources team. Sequoia actually pioneered that. They actually had an HR person and they had some marketing people. They just didn't do it to the same scale. Founders Fund doesn't have it. Like, people, and Fred Wilson doesn't have it. They keep it slim. But that means they're taking those management fees, they're taking that money for themselves. So you're talking about somebody who's a billionaire or has hundreds of millions of dollars. I don't know if Mark Andreessen's a billionaire or not, or Ben Horowitz, but they're certainly centimillionaires at the least. They're effing with people's money. That's why this has gotten so contentious. Whenever you start poking at other people's ability to do commerce, things get sharp-elbowed. So Andreessen Horowitz has sharp elbows. They also have this crazy egos. So they're kind of hated by the other VCs. People may not say that publicly, but the other VCs, the top VCs, do not like them. I know, because I hang out with them and I do deal flow. I bring deals to all of them. And when I bounce as an angel investor and I do a bounce pass and I give it to these people who are like the centers and the forwards who can put more money in than my little 50 to 250K, they don't like them. They're not liked. And that's why this story came out, is that you have other VCs who don't like Andreessen Horowitz and they're waiting for them to stumble. But the truth is, to this point of the, hey, smart people are giving us money, if you double cash on cash, this is not a small fund. small funds like $200 million are the optimal fund, right? 300, 400, something in that range is the optimal fund for returns on a percentage basis. When you have more money, like $1 billion fund, it's very hard to return because if you own 20% of a company, to return $1 billion fund, you can start to do the math. You have to have a $5 billion exit just to return the fund. It's very hard to return a fund. The fact that they return cash on cash double already means, wow, for people with lots of money, cash on cash is how they look at it. So when you're doing small funds, people look at the percentage return, IRR every year, what percentage return. When you start putting billions of dollars to work, you're just looking at like, did I double $1 billion? Good enough. So there's not enough places in the world, in a world of low interest rates or negative interest rates, where you put money in a bank account, less comes back in 7 years. In that world, if anybody can double their money, they're happy. So Andreessen Horowitz will always be able to raise these billion-dollar funds, but it's a bit of an arms race, and it's a philosophical difference that's going on in the world. But Rolf is onto something; they should keep digging.
There you go.
It was a great story.
The other thing is, the other way they effed with people's money, you just have to follow the money, is that they came over the top on some deals and just doubled the valuation that people were willing to pay. And that scared the shit out of everybody, to be candid. Like, a lot of firms were like, really? How much? You did that valuation? And then they did it for companies like Zenefits, Quirky, and things that maybe were a little shaky. And now people are like, if you get your B round from Andreessen, you're in trouble. It's a negative signal, is what some people were saying.
Well, and what's funny in all this is, I know that's a common narrative, is that, Andreessen Horowitz blows up valuations. And then I always think back to the story of when Uber was trying to raise, I want to say, their Series B, and they came to a standstill because Andreessen didn't want to come to a valuation that Travis was interested in. This was like from Kara Story in Vanity Fair. And then that's how Menlo got it instead, right? It's like Travis decided that Andreessen wasn't for him. Yeah.
And the other thing is, they're very thin-skinned. Well, Mark Andreessen in particular is pretty thin-skinned for somebody who's so vocal. So the number of people he's blocked on Twitter is just ridiculous. Either you're blocked by Mark.
I'm not sure I've ever found somebody who blocked me. I think I'm not.
We should say that we were, because it's sort of a badge of honor now if you've been blocked.
So many. He blocked me. He's an LP in my angel fund. He blocked me at some point because I said something.
Is there a way to track on Twitter how many people someone has blocked?
I think if you just type in Mark Andreessen blocked me or P. Marker blocked me. So he was like very quick with that block tool, which people kind of feel is an intellectually dishonest thing to do. It's kind of like, I'm going to shoot my mouth off 50 times a day, right? Like, so I'm Mark Andreessen. I'm going to comment on everything. And the second somebody challenges me, I block them.
Well, people could block him too, so that's fair.
It's funny.
No, I know, but here's the point. It's a finer point, which is, if you want to mix it up, if you're like, I'm going to mix it up, and I'm going to start throwing snowballs. This is like, there were kids when I grew up in Brooklyn who would throw a snowball and then run. If you're going to throw a snowball and run, you kind of got to stay for the return volley, right? And he likes to mix it up and then run. It's a cut and run.
Do you have to stay? That's the whole. That's
kind of a sucker
what they're
punch.
showing.
I think it's kind of a sucker punch.
They don't have to stay, right? They don't have to be quoted in the Wall Street Journal article, right? They can do it their way. He can control the message by delivering the message every moment of every day, right?
Yeah. Go around the press.
Right. Yes.
That's interesting. All right. So, but he's also, I think people. Oh, Rap Genius was the other one. Like the Rap Genius investment, they're kind of like, people are like, but they're good. They're being gone for.
It's just genius.
The other thing.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's just genius.
The other thing I will say though is there aren't too many other people in the Valley who I'd want to talk to. He is so much fun
I
to
love
talk
Mark.
To. Chris Dixon as well.
I'm friends with Chris Dixon.
Fastest talker in the West.
They are really, really smart guys who really understand things that you don't necessarily think the average VC will understand. You go to these subjects that you don't expect him to deconstruct the way he deconstructs everything, and he does. So I don't know. It's interesting how it's and I'm putting together a story on this, how it's a sort of a microcosm of Silicon Valley where there's this like kernel of reality there, but then there's all this artifice around it, right? And that is the way the Valley is. And I think this, again, the most fascinating thing about the Theranos story is that it's about that, right? Is about the artifice and the
storytelling,
the role that the artifice plays not just in what's printed in magazines, but where the money goes and where the money continues to go. And that's fascinating.
And Artifice gets value because it's so close to something that could be really incredible. And I think that's what continues to have people think like, well, maybe I'm not allowed to, I'm an investor in Theranos and I've been explicitly told I cannot get information on the technology, but like, I just know this place and this ecosystem could produce something incredible, and maybe I'm going to take that chance.
All right, let's get into the Theranos story. For people who have been under a rock, Elizabeth Holmes is seemingly, allegedly, apparently, trying to think about what word doesn't get me sued here.
Allegedly really helps.
Allegedly is fine, but apparently, based upon being banned for 2 years, is either completely incompetent or a fraud. I put the "or" in there because that probably keeps me protected legally. Theranos, Nick Bilton, formerly of the New York Times, now with Vanity Fair, did a long expose. It's pretty well written, but I don't know if there's anything particularly new in there.
Some good small details, I think. He's great color.
Great moments, some good commentary. Was there anything that stuck out to either of you that you thought was fascinating on a color basis?
Yes.
The secrecy?
The F.U. Caribou.
That was the best part. That's basically
that's going to be in the movie. If the movie comes out, that's in the trailer.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
it's unbelievable.
Explain it to the audience.
So there's this moment, right? This Wall Street Journal, again, the Wall Street Journal article has come out, questioning the company's practices.
John Caribou,
Exactly, and
he was on this program.
Okay,
and in January.
And it opens with her kind of like in her war room in the company, trying to decide how to react to this. And
she hasn't slept in 2 days. There's food everywhere.
Exactly, and she's got all these employees. She's got to answer to them what's going on, and so basically she calls them together and she gives this impassioned speech about how they just don't believe in what we're doing and we're going to change the world. And then it goes from that to F.U. this like chant from the room to F.U. the Wall Street Journal, like over and over.
F.U. Caribou.
You got it.
It rhymes.
It does.
It's catchy.
And it's not clear. I've read the passage several times. It's not clear like where
it emanated from,
whence it comes. Was it an employee? Was it someone on the side?
Her?
I mean, I think that
it's kind of like a Johnny Cochran, O.J. Simpson trial. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit kind of moment. It's so sticky as a meme. F.U. Caribou.
Right.
Here's the interesting moment from the interview I did with him on January 28th. Let's roll tape.
It's relevant in my mind, and that's the reason we wrote about it, and we included it in that first front page story on October 15th. That being said, I'm not going to be able to say a lot more than what we've published in the paper. As you can imagine, it's a really sensitive subject. But what we did say in the paper is that Rochelle Gibbons, Ian's widow, told me that Ian had told her on numerous occasions before his death that things were not working.
To me, this is a smoking gun. When a co-founder or somebody from the early team who's responsible kills themselves, I have seen 3, 4 founders now commit suicide, tragically. 2 of them have been on this program. Jody Sherman from EcoMom killed himself in Vegas, and Austin Hines from Cambrian Technologies killed himself. A woman from another startup in New York jumped off a roof that was a failing startup. And then you have one of the founding team members. I can tell you, I have yet to witness a founder of a successful company commit suicide, and I have 4 founders who have committed suicide from failing companies. And Bernie Madoff's son killed himself too, right? Tragically. So it's 5. When these things go down, it becomes too much for people to handle. They kill themselves. People at successful companies do not kill themselves. I have not seen it. I don't know if it's a perfect correlation, but to me, the fact that every story does not start with this person's suicide and him telling his wife the technology is not working and him being desperate, and the wife being willing to go on record and talk about this when her net worth is tied to the company's success. Think about that. There is a financial motive for her to keep the dream alive, and she will not keep the dream alive. She wants to honor her husband, I would think, by telling the truth.
I understand what you're saying, but I will say, to me, that story is just upsetting to me. I think you can backtrack and it becomes much simpler, right? Like the reason it doesn't work is because that story about the Google Ventures guy going to Walgreens and his finger wasn't pricked for blood. He had to like draw a gallon of blood out of his arm for the thing to work, right?
It was much simpler.
Or when his first story was like the tests were not done on.
It just doesn't work.
Edison.
Yeah.
Period. It doesn't work. Like everything else. There's your smoking gun.
Right.
It doesn't work.
Right.
Okay. That, to me, like it's no more complicated than that. Everything else is artifice.
So I feel like Theranos is almost like talking to climate deniers or like climate change or something. Like you talk to some people about climate change, you're like, here are 300 scientists who've all gotten together, formed a group. Some of them are Republicans, some of them are left, some of them are libertarians, who knows. There's a consensus here. There's a consensus across the industry and across government agencies that this company is basically a fraud. It doesn't work. They can't prove their technology and they're operating in the health space. How is this company in business, Ellen? What are we talking about here? Why is this so hard? Why isn't it dead? Why isn't the company had the plug pulled? Is there some chance on just a game theory basis that she's going to come out someday and go, look, I have it. It works.
Maybe not that. I mean, I think they were, maybe the last scene of Nick's story is talking about they were going to put out a new product. And I remember for a while they were also talking about some sort of Zika test. I mean, I think people believe, I think what's hard is a lot of these big, small lies beget bigger lies. And I think if you're being, a generous interpretation of a story like Theranos is that there was a kernel of truth in the beginning, that maybe she really believed, and I want to give her this, maybe she really believed that there was a way to build this blood test. And then, she managed to convince some people to come on and try it. And then when it just starts a little bit not working, and then you have to lie a little to sort of keep the momentum going. And then it becomes this, there's no one starts out saying like, oh, I'm going to build this entire thing on something that doesn't exist. That's never how it starts. So I think if you are someone who has been believed it from the beginning, it's really hard to abandon that. And then, what's interesting is you say there's consensus, and I agree. I think most people who are casual observers would say like there's something deeply wrong at this company, or that's their conclusion based on what's been published. But I remember only a few months ago there was like Emily Chang and Brad Stone did a quick interview with Tim Draper, and
which is crazy. I did an interview with them too, and he stood up for them.
Yes, he continues to say people are picking on Theranos. You will all see soon
that you're wrong.
Everything's fine, and people are being mean to Elizabeth Holmes.
See, that's the other thing is gender is like such an underlying issue here. I think that nobody wants to talk about, especially in the face of Ellen Pao and the harassment suit, which was just super ugly, and she lost and. There was harassment that occurred there clearly, but she still lost. And so there's no like clear answer there. And then you have this issue where I think because she was a female founder, people maybe wanted her to be more than she was, right? Like they put her on the cover of every magazine. And I know when I ran a magazine and I was watching the other magazine people, they wanted to pick attractive people. And there was always this discussion of, hey, we haven't had an African-American, an underrepresented minority, a woman on the cover in so long. I know in the conference business, there's constantly a debate. Who are your 5 keynotes? What percentage are female? What percentage is... Do you think... how much did gender play into this, do you think? In terms of the over-coverage of the company. The company was overexposed. Is that... she did it, the press did it, or they were in cahoots?
That could describe dozens of companies in the Valley, right? This is the way that it works, right? Is you overexpose these companies. They all do this. I mean, the difference here is that, if you're going to write a cover story, there has to be some indication that it works, right?
Right.
If you do a cover story on Mark Zuckerberg, you can log on to Facebook and you can see that it connects you to your mom, right?
Right.
You can see that, right? And you can see the possibilities, okay? You can handle an iPhone. There was no way of even vetting that there was a kernel of something there, right? So then how do you decide to write a cover story about this?
Well, and the stakes are higher if it's medical.
It's so much higher. It's so much higher. And so I don't know. To me, it is a story not just about Theranos, but it's about the Valley and how it works and this the way the PR machine works and the way the
toothless journalists
who play into it. It's all part of the,
I mean, you have to look at like some journalism is kind of rubber stamping stuff. I mean, the fact that like TechCrunch did a story about Google acquiring a $600 million company just based on a Wire press release and never checked it. and then it was a fake press release. I mean, there's a real lack of actual journalism occurring.
Sure.
I also.
What do you think about gender? You're a woman. What do you
Right,
think?
so my opinion is different.
Well, it does actually. I think it does count because you're a journalist and you're a woman, and you may have experienced bias in your career. Who knows? So, as a woman, and you look at it, do you think that her gender and people wanting to have a female billionaire unicorn founder led to maybe propping her up more than that should have happened?
So I think anything that's unique about a founder story is something that makes it more interesting to a magazine editor, to someone who's picking story, to a profile. I mean, she is a more intriguing CEO and founder archetype because she is unusual.
Right.
And for a lot of other reasons too. What they were proposing to do was like a pretty groundbreaking thing. These are all checkboxes that make things interesting to a reader, make things interesting to editors who are receiving pitches and things like this. So I think gender is one of many reasons why people covered the company a lot. What I was going to say that I think is interesting, and Nick touches on it a little in his story, which is that we're in this position where tech is a label that is applied to companies that are vastly broad. And we're starting to realize the idea of a tech company is one that almost has very little meaning because most, instead rather it's a label that you put on a company that is fast growing with, like a ballooning valuation with a lot of venture money coming in from the names that we're used to seeing with tech companies who maybe originally, the original
she didn't have tech investors. It was kind of weird.
And she didn't, and her board was not tech. And then what ends up happening is that I think, forget that, for a lot of tech companies, and I think even Carrie Ruth says this in Nick's story, which is someone releases an app that doesn't work, like a messaging app that doesn't work, 2 months before it's ready.
Yeah.
There can be bad consequences, and I can think of a bunch because, you can always think that way, but it's not on the same level as something like a medical screening process. When
they had to restate the tests, there was a doctor who said, I sent somebody to an emergency room. I would not have sent them to an emergency room.
Right. So, I think sometimes if it's miscategorized, and I'm not saying a lot of people really thought Theranos was not a health company, but there's a chance that they could have, forgotten about what it really means to be building a.
There was also something in the story about the person who killed themselves, who was, I think, the chief scientist, or who was the chief science officer or something. He was called into Elizabeth Holmes' office, and then he killed himself. Like maybe
he had
not.
A call saying that the next day she wanted to meet with him, and then he tried to kill himself.
He asked his wife if he was going to be fired, and his wife said, "Yes, you are going to be fired."
So she had called him to say, "I want to talk to you tomorrow," and he killed himself that night. Is that right? Is that the timeline?
The story says that he tried to kill himself that night, and then he died a week later.
Oh, yes, it wasn't immediate.
He tried to kill himself that night? A failed attempt?
What it says is that he tried that night, and she's right. Several weeks later, he died. That's what it says.
Wow. So that is a level of detail around his suicide that I was not aware of. There is, every time the story gets peeled back a little bit more, it gets uglier, huh? Yeah. So she says, I want to meet with you. He asks his wife, am I going to be fired? She says, yes. He tries to kill himself, doesn't succeed, and then weeks later succeeds. I think I need to read that paragraph specifically. Producer Jackie put it in my chat room. And then she bizarrely says in August she's going to present at a conference in front of her peers, goes to the conference, and does a whole deck about some new Zika virus machine, nothing about the Edison. That was also a weird wrinkle. No credibility. What's gonna happen with this company? You're a journalist. It's hard to ask you to speculate, but
I have no idea.
What is the chances that this company rebounds and gets saved? Is there any chance? Is it unlikely? Likely?
If
possible?
It does, that'd be a hell of a story.
Yeah, Jennifer Lawrence would have a great part to play then.
Indeed.
I can picture Jennifer Lawrence.
But yeah. The story as it is now is already very compelling. And
here's something that I think journalists should take a moment to consider. And listen, I'm not going to sit here and admonish journalists. I think the problem in journalism today is fundamentally a funding problem, and that they're chasing SEO titles and they're chasing social optimization, click-throughs, and they don't have enough money to do proper journalism because Facebook's and Google's ad networks are so effective that pulling money out of traditional ads. But putting all that aside, Jean-Louis Gassier, which I'll pull up the piece here, in October of 2015, did what every other journalist covering the company could have done for a de minimis amount of money, which is he went and got his blood drawn, got his tests, and then brought them to his doctor and got tests done from other regular processes and compared them. This is something that probably took him 4 hours of getting his blood drawn, driving to and from, and maybe $1,000 in blood tests, I'm guessing. Maybe $1,500, I don't know. Which I guess if you were going to ask your boss for $1,500 and a day or two of doing this, most journalists, editors would say no. It's not worth it. But he found out immediately in 2015 that this was not working. And he almost made decisions about it. If you don't have any information about this, just Google Jean-Louis Gassier. He worked for Steve Jobs at Apple back in the day and Theranos. Did you guys read this? I mean, is there really enough budget and time given to journalists today to do this kind of journalism? Even what Jean-Louis did in this piece?
I mean, I feel like my editors would say yes to this, but maybe I'm very I mean, that's a great idea.
Are journalists just not in this investigative mindset as much as they should be today?
Well, I think you got to distinguish between different organizations, right?
Right.
Yeah. There's a volume. There's a volume issue here, right? We have so many of these outlets that are covering it in this way where it's let's repeat the press release, right? But that doesn't mean that everyone is doing that, and there are other ways to approach the problem, you don't have to do it that way, and it doesn't cost necessarily an arm and a leg to do it the other way. And it does happen. We've talked about several stories here that worked in that way, right?
Yeah, the Hampton Creek story.
It can and it does, right?
Yeah. So I think it's a huge opportunity out there that journalists and the publishers of these publications need to think about. Ellen, you did a story on Hotel Tonight. Startups are bragging about now making cutbacks. Yeah. Explain.
Oh, I was just intrigued because they say that they want to go public next year, when companies that are much, much larger than them are pushing that off.
Yeah.
Yes, to name one, Airbnb for another. Airbnb won't even talk about.
Yeah. But Snapchat seems to be.
I mean, I think I'm always on the lookout for potentially interesting trends for readers that might help them frame kind of all the news that's going on. So, I mean, I think if you hear companies saying, Hotel Tonight was saying currently their run rate gross booking value from which they take maybe 15% is $300 million. I mean, they're making money, but it's not like
it's not billions.
It's not like we're about to IPO sort of revenue. And they're saying they're going to get there, and
it's what people used to IPO like 10, 20 years ago.
Right,
people would IPO with 25 million in revenues.
Yeah, you could almost see it. I mean, I just thought it was intriguing for that reason. Then again, Snapchat. I mean, if people are doing something unusual, I think we like to track.
Something very healthy is going on in our industry, I think. There's a maturity in our industry. Everybody thought it was getting out of control in 2015 with the valuations, and Andreessen Horowitz pushed that to a certain extent to dovetail the two stories. And then something happened where unit economics and the easy money from the T. Rowe's and the Fidelities who were dipping down and investing in these, later stage unicorns kind of dried up, and they started marking down. Zenefit started marking down their positions in other companies. And now everybody's focused on unit economics. You had Instacart adding delivery charges. You had Postmates, I think, increasing some fees here and there. Yeah. And even Elon Musk, who has, unlimited access to capital traditionally, or has had, and he has been pretty freewheeling in terms of investment. He's one of the biggest investors, I would say, in terms of infrastructure and building Gigafactory. He just sent a memo last week. Hey, everybody has to get focused on profitability. We need to be profitable.
It is. You're right. So different than 15 years ago, and it's heartening. And you mentioned Bill Gurley. Yeah. Earlier, he was one of those voices
banging the drum.
And he was dead on. And not only was he dead on, but there has been a response. It seemingly right.
Yeah. In fact, there was a story I think in the Times. I think maybe Cade Metz wrote it last week, talking about how startups are more responsible now, and in fact, maybe even crediting Gurley's very vocal warnings with having maybe even mitigated some of that damage, which I think is not an unreasonable.
Well, you think about blogging. He blogs like I was actually.
He's a very good writer.
I'm good friends with Bill, and I was just having a conversation with him about his blogging 2 weeks ago. And I said, you only blog every 4 months, but when you do, it has a profound impact. And I think this belt-tightening impact has definitely been felt. I mean, if you look at Uber, which he's on the board of, obviously, and it's the biggest investment he's ever made and the biggest one he'll ever make in his life, in all likelihood, they basically took the silver medal in China and let Didi run it and took 20% of their company, took $1 billion in cash. And now the biggest money-losing aspect of the business is now off of their books, and they got $1 billion for getting rid of them. I mean, that's some serious kung fu. Like, I'm going to take my biggest money loser and make it an $1 billion investment and give me more runway to make the other profitable cities work. Pretty interesting.
Makes such sense, and it's a lesson also for the larger Chinese market. This ties, as everything ties back to Apple, right? One of the things that seemed like their big outlet was China, and that's drying up. China doesn't work like the rest of the world. You're right. It's a great move on Uber's part.
What's this burrito bearing drones stuff that Project Wing and Chipotle? You suggested this one, I think, Cade.
Right. So we've got two internet giants now working on flying drones that can deliver stuff to your door. In this case, it's burritos. Google has what they call Project Wing, where they're building flying drones that can deliver stuff. And so they're partnering with a university on the East Coast and Chipotle as a test, and they're choosing something that's particularly difficult to deliver, a burrito, because burritos tend to get cold, especially if you fly them through the air.
I want to see the packaging around the burrito. And also one of the best parts about that story was it was talking about how drones are not, correct me if I'm wrong, but talking about how drones are not yet allowed to fly above people. Therefore, people need to be sheltered under, I assume, some sort of awning while they wait to receive their burrito drone.
Yes.
I would love to see that on a video. That needs to be a video.
I like that. There's a drone canopy.
Yes.
There you go.
I like it.
There are so many things to be ironed out here. You're right. The FAA doesn't really allow for what they want to do, and Amazon wants to change the rules in addition to Google.
FAA rule is you have to be in sight. You have to have a sight line, and you have to have an operator.
You have to have an operator. So you have to have an operator who can take over in case things go wrong.
Which they're going to do, I think, during the test.
So during the test, right? But if in order for this to really work, you need to get past all that.
Sure.
And Amazon was the first to really bang the drum on this idea. And for Amazon and Google, especially for Amazon, it makes a whole lot of sense, right? This is sort of an extension of what I think is Amazon's biggest idea and biggest advantage is they now build and own the infrastructure. Almost.
They bought planes. Did you see that? They leased their own 747s or something?
We've got trucks. They've got this deal with the Postal Service, and that's why they are a unique machine, and that's why Instacart's going to die. By the way,
or
right? Yeah,
or somebody who wants to compete with Amazon, like Walmart, maybe.
Yeah, but there are limits here.
Yeah.
To what extent do we really want drones flying around delivering burritos?
Hey, you know what the thing is also with those drones? The sound. I just hate that sound.
Yeah.
I was going to make a crack about how you're calling Chipotle products burritos, and I feel like in this city we need to make a distinction between
I like
what is
it.
a real burrito, what is
mission.
This is the important issue. Yes,
is a thing that, to be honest, I enjoy from time to time, but it is not the same thing as a burrito. It does not have the essence
of a burrito. Is that like anti-establishment kind of?
No.
Based on ingredients.
It just tastes really different.
As someone who grew up in Raleigh, North Carolina, and ate burritos in Raleigh, North Carolina for about 18 years, I can attest those were not burritos.
Got it.
I've since moved to San Francisco. I've now had a burrito.
All right, let me just read this to put a cap in that, and then we'll talk about White Ocean and what happened at Burning Man, because it's a very important topic. A few months later, on May 16, 2016, Gibbons was sitting in a family room with Rochelle, I guess that's his wife, the afternoon light draping the couple when the telephone rang. He answered. It was one of Holmes's assistants. When Gibbons hung up, he was beside himself. Elizabeth wants me to meet tomorrow in her office, he told his wife in a quivering voice. This is really sad. Do you think she's going to fire me? Rochelle Gibbons, who spent a lot of time with Holmes, knew that she wanted control. Yes, she said to her husband reluctantly. She told him she thought he was going to be fired. Later that evening, gripped and overwhelmed with worry, Ian Gibbons tried to commit suicide. He was rushed to the hospital. A week later, with his wife by his side, Ian Gibbons died. Okay, so it's not clear if he did a second suicide attempt or if he just took a bunch of pills that eventually, or he drank Clorox, or who knows how he tried to kill himself. And yeah, that's just nasty. That is just really bad stuff. Rest in peace. And just for the entrepreneurs who are working with, I have to have this conversation now with entrepreneurs, because one of the things is with suicide and hopelessness, it's like, I think some of the people who are drawn to entrepreneurship, it takes an unhealthy mind or a very stoic person, one of those two things, to set out on a journey with a 70, 80% chance of failure. You have to either understand that you get to try 3 or 4 times, or you might just be so bipolar, manic, whatever, just some level of mania that you're willing to take on being an entrepreneur. If you're one of those people, like, number one, you're not alone. Don't be an entrepreneur. Go talk to people. None of these companies are worth killing yourself over. It's just suicide is such a sad thing to me. Like Austin Hines, we had him on the program. We did a 2-part episode. The enthusiasm and joie de vivre he had, and the same thing with Jody Sherman, who I had on the program. Like, these were just exceptionally enthusiastic people, but you could tell also that with those highs probably came some lows, like depression. It's just very sad. And as a society goes, when we have autopilot and all these other safety measures, the way we die seems to be becoming more and more weird and strange and unnecessary. Suicide, terrorist attacks, etc. So there's something very weird going on in society. Anyway, I just felt like compelled to say that. All right, let's talk about Burning Man for a second. Is your first burn? How many times?
No, it's my second.
Second burn. Okay.
Yes.
2 in a row.
No, I actually went in 2014.
Okay, great. So it's my second burn too. I went 10 years ago. When I went 10 years ago, there were 15. You've never been to the burn?
I have never been.
All right, so you can never understand it. It's just so life-changing. You see that parody video that somebody did?
I watched it probably an hour after I had corrected one of my coworkers on how it's not a bartering system. Everyone just gifts.
Yeah, it's gift.
It's not bartering, it's gifts. And then he said that, and I was instantly ashamed. So it was a pretty hilarious video.
It's a pretty hilarious video because it's accuracy.
Yeah.
But there is something that has changed dramatically since I first went 10 years ago, when there were 15,000 people in it or so, and somebody told me it's over. There's 15,000 people. It's the end of it, which is, it's turned into an EDM festival as well. Like, there is electronic music stages that are very large. Did you see the Mayan art car?
Mayan art car scared me. It was
unbelievable.
So sparkly, so large, so many lasers.
It's a $2 million laser kit on it, is what I was told from the people who built it. And it was unbelievable. And then my friend Morgan Page played, Diplo played. I mean, this is some major, major acts were there, unpaid. But the way they got there, some of them, I don't know about those two, was a group of Russian billionaire's son built a White Ocean, which was a pretty cool stage with a lot of great music, which is an incredible gift. But they had kind of a closed camp where they didn't let people into it, and they had employees at the camp. And then the camp, you know about this?
Yeah, it was vandalized. I mean, I actually didn't hear about it until after I came back.
That's what I heard about when I got back. So it was not news on the playa, for sure.
Those aren't really my people, so.
Yeah, they're not my people either. But
So,
what do you think of all that, though? They glued it, they trashed it, they stole from it. I mean, it's kind of un-Burning Man to do that.
Here's my take, right? You know, if you really want to get into the spirit of Burning Man, isn't there a better way to make your point than that type of vandalism?
Yeah.
Like, wasn't there this great story from the early days of Burning Man, you know, when it had been invaded by, like, you know, all the stockbrokers, and they were pissed off about all these stockbrokers who were invading their, you know, invading their burn. And so what they did is, and in those days, you know, the only way to get news from the outside was to distribute to these newsletters, and they put these fake stories in the newsletters that the stock market had crashed and all the brokers left. Now, that's the way to deal with it, right?
Something a little more absurdist.
So maybe the guys, you know, with their private camp are, you know, destroying the spirit of it, but the vandalism, isn't that sort of counter to the spirit too?
Vandalism is weird.
I feel both parties were, I mean.
See? Both parties.
Both parties were wrong.
Well, I mean.
I agree with that.
I'm not here to preach about what the spirit of Burning Man is. I've always felt it's kind of what you make of it. And, you know, you can argue a lot about, like, who's harming who. I feel that vandalizing someone's camp is really not the best way to make your point.
Lame.
Yeah.
But you're right. Everybody thinks they're cooler than everybody else.
Right.
Well, the problem is, if you have, I really object to, and listen, I've only been twice, and I'm not a burner, a part of the culture, but I mean, I've had 2 very significantly, I think, transformative, interesting experiences there. So I think it's actually played an important part of my life, actually. So I do think that if you have a closed camp and you don't open it up to other people. The best experiences I've had at Burning Man were just meeting random people and having deep experiences with them.
Yeah.
And the openness of it.
Live and let live, Jason. Let people do what they want to do.
Closed camp is just so bizarre. I went by one camp, a billionaire camp, and they set up I won't say which billionaire, but a very well-known billionaire. Every single trailer was designed to block out anybody from getting to the center of their camp.
Right, you arrange the RVs in a circle.
This was done like parallel, and then they put them so close together that you couldn't walk through, and then somebody said, hey, come over, we're going to do yoga. So I was like, oh yeah, maybe I'll come over. I went over to go, and I couldn't figure out how to get in.
Yeah.
And I was like, to get in, I got to crawl underneath this thing. I was like, I'm not going to be that guy who crawls under. And then if that billionaire guy's there, he's going to be like, oh, Calacanis crawled under a trailer to get into my cab. I was like, I just started thinking about it too much. I was like, this is going to become like an incident that I broke into the camp, and like the camps you're not supposed to be able to break into a camp. They're supposed to be open. My camp was completely open. Yeah. You know, it's like, we had some RVs. Yeah, we had food. We cooked food, but we gave it out to everybody.
Yeah. I mean, I think
it's lame.
The more salient point is, they're probably missing out on something else, but honestly, it is also a place where you can choose to do things how you want to do. And I think,
that's true. Did you go to the temple?
I choose not to go.
That's
you should go.
That's you doing your burn.
I think you should go. But did you go to the temple?
I'm the only authentic person.
I had such a powerful experience at the temple. I mean, for people who haven't been to that and had that experience, I think it's one of the most moving things I've ever experienced in my life. It's like in the top 10 most moving things I've experienced in my life was going to the temple and seeing 100 people there just dealing with stuff, like dealing with people who had died in the past year or just other things. And people don't understand it, but I went back a second time because I was so moved by it that the next day I had to go back and just deal with some stuff that I had dealt with over the past year. And just like, the first time I went, I kind of went to the temple. I didn't have that experience. I think I didn't go in, which was a huge mistake. I just went to it and looked at it. I was like, oh, that's nice. This time I went into it and I spent an hour there.
Reading things on the wall.
And like people literally are putting up shrines or tributes to their dog who may have passed or just other things that happened in life. And it's just like, you sit there and realize, God, it's so much humanity, dealing with so much stuff. It really is like people, I think, project a lot into Burning Man with, all the different things it could be. Yeah. I was there for days, both times, like 4 days. I have never seen anybody be anything but incredibly kind to each other. And for 75,000 people to be struggling with no water and 100-degree heat, and the sandstorms were particularly brutal this year, and be nothing but kind to each other.
Except for the vandals.
Except for that instance of vandalism, which was a reaction to the exclusion which those people were practicing, which I don't think justifies it, but I do think is also wrong.
It's against one of the 10 principles.
It is. You're supposed to be radically inclusive, right? Is that the way they say it? Radically inclusive? Like they were radically excluding people, which is what I experienced at this other billionaire's camp, which when I see him, I'm going to tell him, like, I think that it was anti-Burning Man, the way you set up your camp. Because the other thing that was interesting is they put a free bar outside, but then they locked down their camp. And I was like, I see what you're doing there. You're giving out free drinks so you can lock down your camp. That's even worse. It felt even more weird. Did you see the 747 that they brought to the play?
I did, and I feel bad because I read so many news stories about how they were shutting down the highways to bring the 747, and maybe I was being naive. I expected a larger part of it, and I saw it from across the play. I was like, it's only the front section. Like what?
The first half.
And this is so lame. And then we went up and looked inside, and honestly, it looked really, really cool. So it's
Gadget guy Dave Matthews, who's been on the program, I think more than anybody, did the light show in there with a couple of other people from San Francisco, and the light show was amazing inside of it. They had programmed, a developer from one of the big companies here had programmed like so many LEDs. It was magical. Anyway, if you haven't been to Burning Man, I think it's and a reminder on the person I was talking about, Gibbons from Theranos. He wasn't the founder. He was an early employee, chief scientist. Right, but him obviously had a lot at stake. All right, listen, this has been an amazing episode. Anything else we didn't talk about that we should talk about? What's the Airbnb and discrimination story?
Oh, they've just put out a policy outlining the ways that they hope to mitigate discrimination on the platform. However, they are keeping photos, which is a thing that people who have strong opinions about this are split on.
Why? What if you as a renter you have to have a photo. If you don't,
all parties have to have a photo, and I think people think that opens people up to discrimination. But there are other ways that they've tried to mitigate this. For example, doing instant booking, which would make it harder for hosts to like look at a proposed booker and say like, for whatever reason, I don't want this person. It's just interesting. It's been an issue for the company for a while, and it was this week that they finally put out a big report and like a pretty strong statement on how they hope to fix it. So we'll have to see where it goes.
It's interesting because the community aspect of it is what got people comfortable with it, that you know who's coming.
Yeah.
But there could be people who are like, yeah, black guy, whatever, I don't want that person here. Or young people, I don't want young people, I want old people, I want families. In fact, when you use VRBO, which I use, they very frequently want to know who's coming and what you're using their home for, which would be discriminatory, I guess, because they want families. And I knew somebody who had an apartment, and they said, I only rent to young professional women who are single. I was like, isn't that against the rules? They're like, yeah, whatever.
Well, I think it gets harder to say that when you're as big as Airbnb.
This is true.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the great things. I think this is the thing that Uber got right, or also Lyft, which is you don't know who you're picking up, and you don't know the destination. So in New York,
I've had drivers, not want to do a long trip, because, which is, I kind of understand. I usually try to tell them, if I get booked, I call and say like, hey, I'm actually going to Palo Alto.
It's now
like,
asking me every time.
Yeah.
It's requiring me to give a destination.
Oh, really? That's for pool or for carpool ones if you do.
For pool, it's required, not for Uber.
Even for UberX.
Oh, interesting.
Really?
Every time now.
I think they're prompting people to do that so that you can get the price in ahead of time, but you don't have to.
Yeah, I'll have to see.
But they still don't share it with the driver. So the driver doesn't have that.
Okay.
They do let the drivers now, I've heard from a driver told me this, I don't have it as an Uber investor, but that they can say, I'm going home to,
you can do
Walnut Creek.
On Uber.
Yeah, and then
and that was on Lyft before.
Yeah, so if they're going home to Walnut Creek, they can pick up a final ride, which was a big a legitimate bone of contention. Like it'd be nice if I could get an efficient ride home, or as opposed to having to go off duty. But in New York, Michael Moore did a great TV series called The Awful Truth. Did anybody ever see that?
Sure.
Yeah, he did it for 3 years or something, 2 or 3 years. It was on Fox. Yeah. It was way too controversial to exist on a Rupert Murdoch network or any network for too long. And one of the things he did was he had different people try to hail a cab on Fifth Avenue in New York. And he put a black guy, a black woman, a white guy with a bat, a machete, an AK-47, literally a white guy with a samurai sword got picked up, holding the samurai sword or whatever it was, a machete, and the guy was wearing like jeans and a ripped t-shirt and was dirty, and then a black guy in a suit, the cab driver drove past him to pick up the guy with the samurai sword or whatever. It was like, oh my God, this satire was so brilliant. Just like Michael Moore, when he was on top of his game in the 90s, it was just like, he was so brilliant because it was so funny, and then you'd start laughing, and then you would want to cry. Like it was what satire, like really sharp-toothed satire. Anyway, listen, amazing episode. We've gone on a couple tangents. What have we learned? Apple is dead. Elizabeth Holmes is going to have an amazing trailer at the very least for the Theranos story with the FU Carrie Rue. Carrie Rue got robbed. He should have gotten a Pulitzer for those pieces. Ellen had a transformative experience at Burning Man, but she doesn't want to talk about it. I'll talk to her about it afterwards in the post game. And Cade is sick of talking about Apple. So when we have the Apple iPhone 7.2, let's have him on when we do something more significant. Follow Cade Metz, CADEMETZ, and follow Ellen Huet, HUET. Thank you, Emmy Award-winning producer Jackie, for making the show amazing, the best producer I've ever had. And that's no dig to Gina or Brandis or Tyler, but man, you're crushing it, kid. Great job, Jackie. And thank you to Get Eero and Squarespace, 2 products I love. And just so you know, every advertiser and partner we have on the program, I have to personally love the product or I just won't do the ads. That's it. You know how much the e-cigarette companies offered us?
That's insane. But I would believe it's a lot. Yeah.
A lot. And I was like, yeah, no, I'm not going to do an e-cigarette commercial, nor am I going to smoke one on the show. But other podcasters, you might see that out there. All right, we'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.